I now call on Deputy Colm Keaveney and Deputy Keaveney. You're sharing time with Deputy John Brown, if that's correct?
That's correct.
And you've got 10 minutes each.
Thank you, Concorla. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak on the bill. I'd like to welcome it as an important step in the state's progress towards ratifying the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. The bill it bears some relation to the earlier legislation that was offered in this area, drafted by then Minister Dermot Ahern, Minister for Justice. The bill was based then and in part on the United Kingdom's legislative experience, and the bill now before us clearly benefited from the experiences of the UK legislation, and I welcome that today. Minister, as you are aware, there are over 600,000 people in Ireland, not far from 1 in 5 of the population of the state, who have some form of disability. There are 57,000 persons within Ireland who have an intellectual disability. Historically, Minister, such persons have been treated not well, and the state has lacked to provide for the dignity and respect owed to all persons, simply by their virtue of their humanity. Ireland has a poor record in this respect, as it does in the area of mental health. Now, thankfully, the last 15 years have seen some progress in the area of addressing this historic failing with respect to the Mental Health Act 2001 and 2008, standing as some milestone of progress in the area. I welcome the bill because it is another significant step in updating such legislation as the antiquated Lunacy Act of 1871. It touches on many aspects that go to the heart of what we should regard as the essence of the state calling itself a republic. Equality before the law, liberty of the individual as a default position protected by law, the autonomy of a citizen in making decisions concerning their own lives, including decisions that others may judge as unwise or not prudent. The law both reflects but also helps to shape a societal attitude. In the case of this bill, I hope that it will alter our attitudes towards those people with intellectual disability. It signals a significant move away from the paternalistic approach of the current legislation framework towards one that respects the autonomy and the will of an individual to make a decision. The move from the current standard of best interest towards the one that respects the will of preference of an individual is welcome in that regard, as is the move to substitute decision-making for that of an assisted cooperative decision-making process. In general, though, the government needs to signal through its choices on how it allocates resources, as well as policy and legislation, and that the disability sector should not be viewed as a charitable one. See, Minister, the government need to change their attitude in that respect. Instead, all of our policies need to be informed by attitudes that citizens should be enabled to be given a fair opportunity to live their lives to their fullest potential and play a full part in the life of their communities. So, Minister, resources should not be allocated on a charitable basis, but on one that recognises that the person with a disability are entitled to these supports and the respect as a basic right, the same as any other citizen and as an imperative of social justice. Deputy Niall Collins stated last week that we will be seeking to address several concerns about this bill at committee stage. And as I've mentioned, this bill uses a different type of language from the legislation in general in this area, including the Mental Health Act 2008. Minister, I would like to inquire, how will it interface with such legislation? How will we approach previous legislation in order to make it compatible with this legislation? Will amendments be required before the bill comes into operation? As you are aware, Minister, Ms Eleanor Flynn from NUIG has raised concerns in relation to Section 3 of the bill. This defines mental capacity in a way that suggests that a person is found to lack mental capacity, then it will result in the loss of their legal capacity to make decisions. Article 12 of the United Nations Convention makes it plain that a person with disability must enjoy legal capacity on equal basis with others with respect to all decisions in life. Dr. Flynn believes that this may be problematic from a human rights perspective. There are some provisions in the bill that will not be intended to provide for that result. Thanks, Lescan Corla. And that the current substitution of the decision-making regime will be provided for in that respect. Minister, stronger protections will be needed to ensure that the court appointment of co-decision makers or decision-making representatives takes sufficient and proper account of the will and preference of the individual, not based on what is considered as best interest of the individual, but from a completely different viewpoint. The bill provides for a broad range of powers to provide for informal decision-making, but does not provide for similar safeguards as for other decision-making contained in the bill. The powers needed and provided for in the bill restrict a duty to explore existing cooperative decision-making process. The bill continues to leave unresolved an issue that currently exists under the Mental Health Act. There are still no adequate safeguards for the persons who are detained against their will. There has been case law on this, and the European Court of Human Rights demand that changes be made now in our legislation, not the least in which changes must be demonstrate the ability to challenge the lack of liberty in our current set of legislation. Section 106 of the bill restricts the application of the bill from a wide range of areas, including marriage and voting rights. This is, again, in conflict with the United Nations Convention, which states that a person must enjoy legal capacity in all areas of life. I've already referred to the change of attitude that the bill signals. In that regard, could I ask the Minister to consider the name of the Office of the Public Guardian? Minister, that to me suggests that we are returning back to the older paternalistic view that we are trying to work to move away from within this legislation. Outside of any concern with the content of the legislation, but it is essential that its operation and the provisions within is provided for, and essentially what we need to get clarity on is the question of funding. Several aspects of this bill form issue on a legal aid base, and in particular, there is provision for the Office of a Public Guardian will require solid and significant commitments in the legislation with regard to funding from the government. Now, Minister, there is little point in advancing such legislation only to find out that the provisions remain out of the reach of sufficiently enforcing the legislation if we can't provide the resources to do so. Sadly, this government has shown little commitment to protect funding to the disability sector, and the recent budget only demonstrates that. These measures, Minister, as you are aware, included a savage 20% cut in the respite grant, increases in the prescription charges and the assessment of the entitlement of medical cards, particularly for those people who have been affected with a disability. There has been cause for significant anxiety, and the decision and the refusal to reverse some of those decisions has challenged the ideals of living in a republic. The true testament of the government's commitment to the disability sector would be to reverse those cuts. The true...
Speaker, please.
It is...
Thank you. We'll have one speaker, please. You have 1 minute, Deputy Keaveney.
Very clear what commitment I made prior to the last general election. Maybe the Minister...
To the bill, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very aware of...
Thank you. We'll have one speaker.
Very aware of
you've got 48
very
seconds.
aware of your life.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy.
It is perhaps
Thank you.
very aware of your
Thank you.
very aware of your broken promises.
Thank you, Deputy Keaveney.
Very aware.
Can you address your remarks to the Chair, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The true test of the commitment in the provision of the bill will be for the Minister to reverse the odious cuts for the people who have disability in this country, Chair. And it's probably easy for the Minister to adopt that sort of cynical, critical role. I often wonder what it's you know, this Dáil is broadcast live to the nation, and people sit at home today and wonder why the minister...
We're on the bill now, not the television page of the Examiner.
And of course, people are cynical when they see that a minister in this section would critically object to the reversal of decisions that affect the most vulnerable people in society.
Thank you.
To that end, I would hope that the minister will open a...
Thank you.
You know,
your time is up.
Try and remember your own faults.
Your time is up, Deputy Keaveney.
The lies and the untruths that you get to the Irish people.
Deputy Keaveney,
your time... selective memory.
Deputy Keaveney, your time has elapsed, and it's a pity your late speech between a farm member has been interrupted.
Cooperation in that respect.
Thank you. Deputy. Thank